Tetris. There are lots of computer game adaptations released in the past few decades, and the vast majority of them were pretty bad, which is a separate subject, to be honest. Tetris could have been some weird CGI cartoon about people who live inside of the computer game, but fortunately they did the right thing. It is a biographical film about a businessman Hank Rogers and his attempts to purchase publishing rights for Tetris, and meeting the creator of the game, Alexei Pajitnov, in the process. So yeah, it is a biographical film, but naturally it is very, very fictionalized. You know, they have car chasing sequences where the characters are trying to escape from the KGB agents. Everyone understands that this is just pure fiction, but it is kind of excusable given how this scene is presented. But more or less, the script is based on actual events, and some of the key plot points are presented reasonably accurately. Because, first of all, the screenwriter is competent, and second, the movie was produced with the direct involvement of both Hank Rogers and Alexei Pajitnov. They are executive producers, and they obviously consulted the team. The film also depicts the involvement of Nintendo, and apparently the filmmakers collaborated with them, obtaining all of the permissions to show Nintendo's games and consoles. Which leads to an interesting situation when the Japanese company is portrayed in an overwhelmingly positive light. Nintendo is a force for good in this world, a knight in shining armor. It must be also mentioned, because it is kind of important, especially for all of the video game enthusiasts, that Hiroshi Yamauchi is an actual character in the movie, and Minoru Arakawa is also there. Okay, the story goes like this. Hank Rogers finds out about Tetris at a game conference in 1988. He figures out that some of the distribution rights are still available, so he purchases a license for the Japanese market for several platforms, from Mirrorsoft that supposedly obtained rights from a government organization in the Soviet Union. With that license, he visits Nintendo and persuades them to form a partnership, since it is more or less self-evident that the game has a potential to become a huge hit. But then things get complicated, because it is not entirely clear who actually has rights for which platforms, especially rights for the handheld devices, which is super important since Nintendo is about to release Game Boy. Which means that Hank Rogers has to personally travel to the Soviet Union to sort things out. So the bulk of the movie is actually set in Moscow. Well, kind of. Obviously, the Soviet Union is supposed to be dark, grey, and filled with ugly commie blocks, because that's the reality. But the filmmakers were not able to shoot the Moscow scenes in Russia itself, or in Eastern Europe, where Budapest or Sofia usually stand in for Russian cities. Budapest probably wasn't as dark and grey as necessary, so they shot Russia in Scotland, of all places. Apparently, Glasgow in 2020 looks exactly like Moscow used to look in 1988. Fun fact. When the Russian movie industry shoots scenes that are supposed to take place in California, they routinely do it in Siberia. Sometimes in Russian films you can see a guy standing on the pier in Santa Monica, and then the bear jumps out of the woods, grabs the actor, and drowns him in the snow. Because that's the reality. Apart from this Scottish hell presented as Russia, the movie, as I've said before, stays quite reasonable. Well, if you discount some obligatory Hollywood tropes like father misses the performance of his child at a school event, which is a big deal for everyone for absolutely no reason. I mean, the character of Hank has objectively important stuff to do unless he wants to lose his house and all of his money. But somehow his family thinks that visiting another torturous child performance is a top priority. After that, they can all go and live under the bridge. It doesn't matter. But yeah, occasional stupidities don't overshadow the script, and the film stays surprisingly entertaining. The filmmakers even made an almost unprecedented step to use actual Russians to play Russians. Well, with a couple of exceptions. And they actually speak Russian in the movie. I mean, normal Russian, not some gibberish. That's a huge achievement in itself. So somehow Tetris manages to be one of the best movies about computer games or based on a computer game, which is unbelievable. You kind of expect over and over again until you give up completely that some of the franchises can be transformed into decent movies. And then you watch what they do with the Super Mario, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Resident Evil, Doom, or most recently with The Last of Us. Seriously, who could have thought that one of the best movies based upon a video game would be a film called Tetris? No, seriously, Tetris, a game about shapes falling into the glass. So, what have we learned from Tetris? Glasgow looks like Moscow from the late 80s. Nintendo is the best company in the world. You can actually hire Russian actors to play Russians. Who knew? KGB is everywhere. You should read your contracts. In the end, unexpectedly, Tetris is one of the best computer game adaptations. It is funny, it is entertaining, and it is, for a change, not made by morons who don't care about the source material.